Hi there all, and welcome to my next modern game review. Today I'm going to review Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga. It is a real-time strategy game that includes the Clone Campaign's expansion pack bundled together in a box set. It was also released on Windows on November 13th, 2001 in North America, and on November 23rd, 2001 in Europe. It was also released on Mac on June 6, 2002. This game was developed and published by LucasArts, now renamed Lucasfilm Games, in collaboration with Ensemble Studios, the creators of the Age of Empires series from 1 to 3. By licensing their Genie engine. It is really interesting since the Genie engine was used for Age of Empires 1, which was okay, Age of Empires 2, which is an utterly fantastic game by the way, and most recently enough, Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, which is an amazing game for many awesome reasons. It was also published by Aspyr for Mac. By the way, I want to let you all know that I'm playing the Steam version on a Windows 10 Pro laptop computer, hence why you might see a little bit of fuzziness throughout the review. Anyway, Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds has received massive amounts of praise during its release date, although I've heard a couple of criticisms from the game itself, such as not feeling like Star Wars, or due to difficulties with the gameplay mechanics, or problems with the AI. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but let's go ahead and find out. So let's get started with the game's graphics. I've noticed the graphics in this game have aged rather poorly in the last 22 years, and it hasn't gotten better ever since its release date back in 2001. What do I mean by that? Well, my issue with the game's graphics is that the animations for the units look rather rough around the edges, and they don't seem to come across as natural anymore by today's standards. And another issue is the game's environment, which, although nice and a bit more lifelike than Age of Empires 1 and 2, they've gone kind of rather stale and less impressive over time by 2023, more than 22 years since the game's release date. Which is unfortunate, but visuals in a real-time strategy game aren't all that important, to say the least. Anyway, of course, this real-time strategy game is 2D isometric with a maximum resolution of 1280 by 1024, which is the highest visual setting, but due to the game's engine limitations, it hasn't fully unlocked as of yet. So, yeah. It's rather disappointing that none of the graphics in the game's resolution has been improved by 2023. I did stretch the game's aspect ratio to 16:9 to make it better than its original 4:3 aspect ratio. Just to let you know. Anyway, the sound effects in this game are well done and high quality for the most part. Even the ones originated straight from the movies with newly remastered audio recordings. Although the sound effects are a little too clean, they do feel very Star Wars-like with lots of laser shooting, or I should say, blaster fire, which is awesome. And I find it nicely impactful all around. So I have no problems with the sound effects in this game at all, except for the music volume for some strange reason, which I will get into right away. Although the game's soundtrack by John Williams' score is wonderfully composed, the biggest issue I have with it is the music volume, which gets way too loud when booting up the game, and when I tried lowering the music volume, It doesn't work at all. This leaves me to conclude that the soundtrack volume system that runs John Williams' score has become completely non-functional, except for turning it off or on in general, which still works strangely enough. I still love John Williams' score, by the way, for his utterly fantastic music, and his soundtrack used in the game is transitioned relatively well through the game's gameplay missions and matches, which is one of the few saving graces of this game. Of course, let's not forget that John Williams' score used in this game is from the original trilogy to Episode 2, which is awesome, although the soundtrack from Episode 3 never came out at all for this game, which is unfortunate to say the least. And I think it would have been a nice bit of extra DLC for Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, but sadly it never came to fruition. Oh well, I guess that's the way to go. Anyway, next is the voice acting. And as far as it goes, the actors and actresses did a fairly good job playing their roles, even the ones portraying the characters from the original trilogy. And yes, the characters from the prequels, more or less. Except there's a couple problems I've noticed right away. The first problem is that several of the actors returned to play their original roles from the prequel films that nobody likes or cares about. The second problem is that none of the original actors from Episode 4 through 6 of Star Wars had ever returned to voice their original characters, which is also not a good thing. But then again, the new actors who played the characters in the original trilogy did a fairly good and overall charming job for their part, so that's good enough for me. Anyway, I've noticed that when you put up the game's premise, the quality in the clips shown from the events of Star Wars Episode 4, 5, 6, 1, and 2 look really low on its resolutions, and really eye-soaring to say the least. Which is not a good thing since I used to actually like this premise as a kid. But now I don't like it anymore as an adult. Oh well, I guess this is how it goes then. The next thing I've noticed is that they've changed the music for the game's premise from a dramatically optimistic one in the base game to a more dramatically dreadful kind of music for the clone campaigns. Although the music itself is not bad, it's not good either since it's inclusion in the clone campaigns, which looks way too dreadful for me than it needs to. And I absolutely despise it. Not only did the new music ruin the overall original feel of Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, but it also made the game far less hopeful than it needs to be. So yeah, I'd rather change the game's premise's music back to its original base game form. Thank you very much. Now then, after the game's dreadfully bad premise is over and the wonderful title appeared, the game's menu is now shown on screen. Although the menu screen is similar to Age of Empires 2 menu screen, it is a lot more creative and feels very Star Wars-like, which I like a lot. And this game's menu screen looks great. So, kudos to the dev team for making the menu screen in this game really nice, especially the one coming from the base game. Anyway, let's head over to the base game's campaign section, namely episodes 4, 5, 6, and 1, respectively. In the base game, you have 6 campaign stories, which are Basic Training, 9, Boss Nass, Darth Vader, Princess Leia, And finally, Chewbacca. All of which can be played in any given order if you wanted to. So, that's good. First, let's start with basic training, which serves as a tutorial where it teaches you, the player, how to learn the game's gameplay mechanics. In basic training, there's a story that follows Chewbacca's father named Atishuk, along with Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, trying to raise a Wookiee army strong enough to kick the Trade Federation out of the Wookiee colony world of Alaris Prime. Basic training may seem slow at first, but it does seem to go by relatively quickly once you get the hang of it. And it was a lot of fun going through all the missions, though. Next is the Trade Federation campaign, which has you play as 09, the droid commander of the Trade Federation's droid army, blockading and eventually beginning the invasion of Naboo. It's more of an exaggerated version of the Phantom Menace's story with extra missions, not seen in the movie, but it is an interesting game story nonetheless. There is a bonus mission where instead the Gungans and our main heroes winning the Battle of Naboo, it lets you play an alternate history story mission of the Trade Federation winning the Battle of Naboo by destroying the Gungan army successfully, which is awesome. Playing the last Trade Federation mission of completely wiping out the entire Gungan army from the face of the earth throughout this entire story right there. And I love it. Of course, there are several Trade Federation missions where you can crush the Gungans, which is also satisfyingly awesome for many, many good reasons. Oh yeah, gotta love a good old-fashioned Gungan barbecue brought to you by the Trade Federation near you. No racism is required. Hee hee hee. Anyway, joking aside, let's move over to the next campaign. Thirdly, of course, you have the Gungan campaign, where you're playing both as Boss Gallo, ancestor of Boss Nass, and Boss Nass himself. The first three Gungan missions begin almost 3,000 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, with Boss Gallo taking the helm of the story. And it follows the liberation of the Gungan tribes from Boss Rogel, who's the villain of the good guys. The rest of the story follows Boss Nass's liberation of Naboo from the greedy Trade Federation occupiers, and that's pretty much it. Captain Tarples and all the main characters from episode 1 are included in this story, so yeah, sure, why not? And yes, I did play the Gungan campaign, and I absolutely hate the Gungans. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, Dogs and Dogs Starlock 19, why did you play the Gungan campaign, even though you absolutely hate the Gungans? Well, fellas, I needed to play the Gungan campaign just to write this review, and as a good reminder of tormenting myself into playing through all of it, so you don't have to. So yeah, I wasn't very happy into playing the Gungan campaign as the Gungans, but I did enjoy playing the regular Gungan units. Technically speaking, and weirdly enough, having better characterizations than the Gungan heroes themselves, who I actually hate the most for being absolute caricatures of caricatures from episode 1. Redundant like redundant? Anyway, the Gungan campaign, although interesting, is hardly better either, and it barely counts as a good story. So yeah, even though I enjoyed playing the regular Gungan units and partially the campaign, I still hate the Gungan characters' voices for their countless asinine behavior, and now I'm gonna avoid playing the Gungans at all costs. Thank you very much. Anyway, let's move on to the Galactic Empire's campaign, in which you assume the role of Darth Vader shortly after the events of Episode 4 to the end of Episode 6. It shows Darth Vader trying to destroy the Rebel Alliance throughout the campaign storyline. There's, of course, another alternate history story mission where instead the Rebel Alliance and the Ewoks winning the Battle of Endor, the Galactic Empire wins the Battle of Endor, so it's a pretty cool mission, and overall a great campaign story for Darth Vader all around. Next is the Rebel Alliance campaign, where it's mostly set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And it follows the story of Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker recovering an ancient artifact called a Jedi Holocron, or pieces of a Jedi Holocron for Jedi Master Chu Shin-John, who, spoiler alert, dies at the end of the third Rebel Alliance campaign mission. There's an interesting last bonus mission taking place before the events of A New Hope, which takes place in the Silken Asteroids, and I had a great time with this mission, as well as the rest of the Rebel Alliance campaign. Anyway, last but not least for the base game is the Wookiee campaign, which follows Chewbacca's story along with Han Solo liberating the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk and freeing the Wookiee prisoners from captivity in the mining world of Kessel from the evil Galactic Empire. And I absolutely loved the Wookiees, especially their story and gameplay and mechanics all the way through. I had a great time playing the Wookiee campaign, and I highly recommend all of you to play as the Wookiees just to try them out for the first time. They are that good in this game. Alrighty then, after going through all the base game's campaigns, now let's move on to the Clone Campaign's expansion pack, which is just Episode 2, but more expansive and set during the first month of the Clone War. In the Clone Campaign's expansion pack, there are 2 new civilizations, which are the Confederacy of Independent Systems, or just the Confederacy, and the Galactic Republic, both of whom have campaigns of their own. First is the Confederacy campaign, which follows the story of Severon Stan, a Chiss warrior and main hero of the Confederacy story, serving as Supreme Commander or General during the Clone War, and she's the apprentice and dark acolyte of former Jedi Master turned Sith Master Count Dooku, in an attempt to take control of the Galactic Republic's valuable resources and steal a super weapon called the Decimator from the Wookiees. Finally, there's the Republic campaign, which starts the same way as the Confederacy's first mission, the Battle of Geonosis, except on the opposite side of the battlefield. And its rest of the story is about trying to destroy the Confederacy's fuel and military ships before they can escape, which is neat, I guess, except a funny little plot hole at the end, hilariously enough. There are other missions that show the Galactic Republic attempting to recover all of their resources and territory stolen from the Confederacy, in addition to destroying the Decimator, which was a super weapon stolen from the Wookiees by the Confederacy. as well as eliminating their illegally built factories, which is just why. I get that the factories to the detonators needed to be destroyed because they were built by the Confederacy, but the detonator is it's a super weapon built by the Wookiees. And yet our main heroes of the Republic wanted to destroy the detonators because they're evil? What? I don't get it. And yes, Chewbacca is in this story. And he serves as the main character with 2 Jedi apprentices who are actually twins, which is okay, I guess. And there lies the problem with his portrayal. I absolutely hate how he was portrayed in the Republic campaign. Instead of expanding upon his story in a way that's believable or makes more sense in a more sensible manner, they chose to focus on Chewbaca's temporary fall to the dark side, which is just weird. Looks like we got a terrible Anakin tragic story, fellas. Be very afraid. Anyway, I find Chewbaca's story completely off-putting and contradictory to what he said about surviving the Jedi massacre, quote-unquote. So yes, I know Chewbacca is a great character and all, but his plot and characterization in the Clone Campaign's expansion pack is so contrived and complicated that it makes Chewbacca's story arc in the base game even less memorable than before. And that's precisely the problem. Anyway, although the Clone Campaign's expansion pack is interesting and somewhat more challenging than the base game, the missions themselves are really messy in their story structures and not well written at all. Which is true, since real-time strategy games in general don't always have the strongest or the best of writing in its stories. But I digress. Anyway, some of the missions that I played through are downright atrocious in their map level designs. There's a final bonus mission in the Galactic Republic campaign which has you play as the New Republic, aka the Rebel Alliance, in which your goal is to liberate the capital world of Coruscant from the Galactic Empire. I really don't like this mission very much, and it should have been a completely different type of ending for the Republic campaign. I think an additional Rebel Alliance campaign would have been really nice for the Clone Campaign's expansion pack, and although the bonus mission in the Republic campaign serving as a semi-Rebel Alliance campaign is kind of a neat idea, it's not very good either. And it should have been its own thing from the very beginning. But I guess this would have been a little too difficult to implement since the Rebel Alliance's story is already done in the base game. So yeah, it's really disappointing, unfortunately. There's no Naboo campaign, which is unfortunate, since I think this would have been a great story for them to shine as part of the Clone Campaign's expansion pack. But due to their stoic personalities and wooden dialogue, I guess it's probably hard to like them and play the Naboo civilization in a playable campaign story. You can play the Naboo civilization in skirmish mode, multiplayer mode, and scenario editor mode, which is nice. Although I think LucasArts should have probably developed the Naboo in a better light, but I guess that'll never happen anytime soon. Oh well, such is life. The Clone Campaign's expansion pack, while lackluster, did actually add more or change up the game's gameplay mechanics from the base game, such as reaching a new population cap at 250, new maps, and new units and or technologies added in for your existing buildings. For example, the power core now having shield-based technologies, increasing hit points, efficient production, and a power droid unit to create. Well, I think this wraps up my critiques on this entire game's campaign stories, especially coming from the Clone Campaign's expansion pack. Anyway, you can play with and or against AI players in skirmish mode, which is cool, or real players in multiplayer mode, which is neat, I guess. Although admittedly, I'm more into playing against AI players than real players in this game, since the servers may or may not work from my computer as of late. And I don't think I'll be interested in playing Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds multiplayer mode anytime soon. So yeah, I can't think of any thoughts for multiplayer mode other than praising its existence in the game. Anyway, skirmish and multiplayer modes aside, gameplay-wise is not really the deepest of RTS games out there, such as Age of Empires 2. It's also not the most casual of real-time strategy games, like, say, Halo Wars 1 and 2, of course, which hopefully I'll get into reviewing those games someday. But we'll just have to wait and see. And yes, I know that it's unfair to mention the Halo Wars games since they actually came out years after the release of Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, but I hope you'll understand my point of view. Anyway, I digress. Even though the gameplay in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds isn't as deep as Age of Empires 2, it does have a lot of similarities to Age of Empires 2. And that's kind of precisely another problem, because as you can see right away, you're actually playing Age of Empires 2 with a Star Wars reskin, which of course means it's still a base building real-time strategy game, in which there are 4 resources you, the player, can collect, which are carbon, food, nova crystals, and ore, all 4 of which serve similar purposes as wood, food, go figure, gold, and stone in Age of Empires 2, and they're used to build bases and creating armies. There are about 4 tech levels in this game, like Tech Level 1, Tech Level 2, Tech Level 3, and Tech Level 4, which are similar to the 4 ages from Age of Empires 1 and 2. Anyway, as mentioned before about the population cap, it can be increased by building 3 VAP shelters by 5. Which are houses in Age of Empires 2. Command centers too can increase your population cap by 5, similar to town centers in Age of Empires 2. Of course, let's not forget that fortresses can also increase your population cap by 20, similar to castles in Age of Empires 2 as well. Armies can be created from regular troopers up to mounted units, and cavalry units from Age of Empires 2 are replaced by mechanized units for Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds. There are special units such as Dark Troopers for the Galactic Empire, Berserkers for the Wookiees, Royal Crusaders for the Royal Naboo, and Destroyer Droids for the Trade Federation, just to name a few that I can think of on top of my head. The siege weapons in this game have the same functionality as the siege units in Age of Empires 2, although with a more expansive Star Wars theme thrown in there for good measure. Next is that you can build shipyards and create naval vessels for water-based combat, transportation, and gathering fish in the water. And finally, you can build spaceports and create cargo hovercrafts, which function the same way as the market and trade carts from Age of Empires 2. Although, unlike trade carts, cargo hovercrafts can actually hover over water and empty space, which is nice. While it's true that much of Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga plays similarly to Age of Empires 2, with most of its gameplay elements reskinned into Star Wars, it does have its fair share of differences, not related to Age of Empires 2, such as shield buildings, shielding technologies, more ranged units than melee units, the inclusion of blasters to replace gunpowder weapons from Age of Empires 2, longer ranged blasters slash rocket turrets, anti-aircraft units slash turrets, animal nurseries for captured foreign-like animals such as banthas and nerfs, and of course an airbase for your aircraft. For a few examples, TIE Fighters, TIE Bombers, Y-Wings, and X-Wings, which can be used as both air support against land, water, and air units. So that means every unit except the animals carries around blasters, not swords. Although, admittedly, there are still melee units around. It's just that they're not accessible to the players, except in campaign missions and scenario editor mode. Of course, there aren't any bow units available, which I've noticed right away, and that's fine. Anyway, in another example, the way monks are handled has changed from healing and conversion in Age of Empires 2 to combat monk warriors while still retaining the monk's conversion mechanic in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds. Also, the monks had their names changed to Jedi or Sith. The relics had been renamed into Jedi holocrons, which can be picked up similarly to relics, and can still be transported by Jedi or Sith to their respective temples, which function the same way as monasteries in Age of Empires 2. Medics take over the role of healing units, except droids, of course, since they're inorganic units, not organic beings. All of these new gameplay elements added to Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds and its Clone Campaign's expansion pack have never been thought possible before in an Age of Empires game, let alone 1 and 2, since both of those games take place in ancient times before the rise of the Industrial Revolution, and you really couldn't add a single flying unit for obvious reasons. So this actually helps differentiate itself from Age of Empires 1 and 2, and it further adds that this is noticeably a Star Wars themed game that LucasArts can do away with than what Ensemble Studios did in Age of Empires 1 and 2. Thus, we get to see aircraft, shields, Jedi, Sith, and many more. Which means this really helps make the game stand out more often on its own 2 feet. with its unique enough gameplay without coming across as a rehashed game. Which of course is sometimes true in some places, but many of these units in this game are ranged units than melee units. After all, since blasters and long-distance battles are a lot more common in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds compared to swords and close-quarter combat fights in Age of Empires 1 and 2. Now, it is true that there are fewer tactics at your disposal in this game than in Age of Empires 1 and 2, since cavalry units were the most important units to run over many units. But since this is a range-heavy game, not a melee-heavy game, so that means your melee units are more often than likely that they're gonna get mowed down anyway before you can do anything about it. And your only advantage you can do is to plan everything appropriately by eliminating your enemies from a fair distance away, including finding ways to play through the game by understanding your civilization's strengths and weaknesses, which I don't mind at all. Now, it is worth mentioning that there are, of course, far fewer civilizations in this game than in Age of Empires 1 and 2, which is disappointing, but it does make the game easier to understand how each civilization works against one another, and the differences between the civilizations in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds are far more profound than, say, the civilizations in Age of Empires 1 and 2, where any differences shown are relatively small in changing the battlefield. Although admittedly it does cause some issues on what kinds of civilizations you want to use for offensive or defensive capabilities. Or both. In Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds and its Clone Campaigns expansion pack. For me, though, I'm both an offensive and defensive type of player in real-time strategy games, so you're not really gonna find any examples of what kinds of civilizations I choose as an offensive or defensive faction. But I can tell you that my favorite civilizations in Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds are the Wookiees, Rebel Alliance, and Galactic Empire. So yeah, that's that. Anyway, before I end the review, I've noticed a lot of my playthroughs that the AI, namely the friendly AI in a few missions, and weirdly enough, the AI in some skirmish matches, if you save and come back later by loading up the match again, would not work sometimes. Or not at all for some utterly baffling reason. But this may have something to do with the latest computer that I'm currently playing on. Or it could have been the Steam version. I'm not sure if it's true for everyone else, but who knows. Maybe I should have tested the GOG version just to see any possible differences I might come across. Or maybe I should have gotten the unofficial bug fix patch. But that might actually defeat the purpose of playing Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds and its Clone Campaigns expansion pack in its official format for review purposes. So yeah, it's best to leave the game where it stands. Anyway, I think it's time to wrap this review up. Although Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga hasn't aged all that well in the last 22 years, both graphically and mechanically, it does have a lot of strengths by adding new things not seen in the Age of Empires games, such as aircraft, anti-aircraft systems, power cores, animal nurseries, energy shields, and blasters. The proper use of John Williams' really fantastic score and soundtrack really helped this game for the most part. A fairly good enough cast of characters and actresses playing the original characters, and very few prequel characters correctly, except the Gungans. They're the worst. A semi-workable AI, high quality enough Star Wars themed sound effects, and a good enough story. Which brings my final score for Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga an 8 out of 10. Overall, a great game, and a really solid one at best. Granted, this game did come out at full price on launch day, but now Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds is availably bundled together in a Saga box set with the Clone Campaign's expansion pack included, and it's now sitting at an incredibly low price, and it's available on Steam and GOG, whichever one you want to buy. And it's awesome. I highly recommend buying and playing this game if you're both a Star Wars fan, pre-Disney that is, and an Age of Empires fan. If you're not a fan of either or both of those games, then that's okay, if you don't want to get them anyway. Although Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga is a great game, it's not an utterly fantastic game like Age of Empires 2, with the expansion packs included, of course. And, well, let's face it, that's a really difficult thing to top it all off, despite LucasArts doing a great job with this game. Anyway, thank you all for watching my review of Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga. Hope you all liked it, and I'll see you all in future videos. Take care.